December 5, 1945. Late afternoon light lay flat over the Florida coast, the kind of light that makes everything look clean and harmless. 5 Grumman TBM Avenger bombers rolled toward the runway at Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station and rose, one after the other, into a sky that still carried the last warm breath of the war. Engines droned like steady thunder. Aluminum skins flashed. On the ground, mechanics shaded their eyes with oil-blackened hands and watched the formation tilt east toward open water. A routine navigational training flight, an easy triangle over the Bahamas and back. Nothing more. The pilots were young, most of them, bruised by a world conflict but alive to its ending. Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, 30 years old, combat veteran, sat in the lead aircraft FT-28. He had thousands of hours in the air and the stiff, methodical calm that follows experience. The men behind him, students and radio operators, gunners and navigators, wore that loose, relieved smile of people who can finally imagine a future. They taxied out with jokes and tapped gauges with knuckles, not because they distrusted the instruments, but because tapping had gotten them this far. The Atlantic lay ahead, a blue table running to the horizon, broken only by weather and the Earth's slow curve. The plan was textbook: east to the Bahamas, north to make the second leg, west to Florida. At Hens and Chicken Shoals, they would run practice, hold bearings, turn, and return to the airfield with the sun lowering behind them and dinner waiting in barracks. It was called Navigation Problem Number 1, a pattern flown so often that ground crew could recite the timing. There was fuel in the wings, pencils on the knee boards, compasses alive with purpose. Somewhere beneath that wide sky, a quiet promise hovered. Today, nothing goes wrong. 2 hours out, the Atlantic changed its mind. Winds freshened, slanting across the nose. The white line of breakers around the islands blurred to smudges, and then to nothing. A thin film of haze slid in low, not enough to call a storm, more like a suggestion that the ocean could misplace itself. On the ground, controllers listened to a dozen channels at once, a braid of voices speaking coordinates and headings like a language no one remembered inventing. The tower log showed the time, 3:40 p.m. A voice broke through with a strain that was almost invisible, like a hairline crack in glass. "My compass is out. I'm over land, but it looks wrong." The room went still. That was Taylor. Calm, clipped, the words pushed through static as if he were stepping on stones in a river. "Over land," he said, and yet nothing was where it should be. Keys that didn't look like keys. Shorelines that leaned the wrong way. Someone in the room wrote a single word in the margin, distortion, and underlined it once. Controllers answered, asking for headings, asking him to turn west. West is home. West is Florida. Follow the setting sun. Other aircraft on other frequencies paused, as if the sky itself were leaning closer to hear. The reply was slower, thickened by interference. "I can't make out anything. The ocean looks white." There are sentences that lift out of time and become rooms you can enter. That one was a door, and when it opened, the Atlantic beyond it was not the same. A trainee's voice cut in, young, constrained, respectful of rank, even with fuel burning down. "If we head west, we'll get home." For a second, hope sharpened like a pencil point. Then Taylor, cautious and certain of his uncertainty, ordered a new heading the other way. The formation obeyed. The geometry of rescue dissolved into the geometry of loss. For 90 minutes, the 5 planes moved across nobody's map. Avenger cockpits are small theaters, dials and needles, the soft thrum of air across metal, the ghostly glow of a radio face. Imagine a hand on the throttle, the metallic taste of fear not yet admitted as fear. A flight book, sweating beneath a palm. Detours become circles. Circles become spirals. The sun tilts toward the edge of the sea an hour faster than your calculations say it should, and a thin film of cloud makes the horizon less a line than a rumor. West is a promise that keeps stepping backward. On shore, telephones rang in a daisy chain down the coast. Stations called stations, filters hissed, pencil tips tore paper. Ground operators worked on triangulations that refused to settle. One set of ears swore clear skies, another, not far away, reported rain and rough air. The world around the 5 aircraft could not agree on what the weather was, as if reality had frayed at the edges and begun to curl. At 6:20 p.m., the voice came again, thin as fishing line pulled to breaking. "We'll have to ditch soon. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." In training, they teach you that there is honor in the formation, that you rise together, turn together, descend together. What they do not teach you is how to hear those words with dusk closing like a fist. The transmission scratched, cracked, and finished. The frequency went quiet except for the blank breath of static. If you have ever heard a machine fall silent where it should be loud, you know how a room fills with a new kind of weight. The sea at night is an absolute thing. Above it, a TBM Mariner, huge, dependable, a flying lifeboat, rose from Banana River Naval Air Station, its crew checking their own gauges with practiced gestures. They were called Training 49, and they pivoted toward the coordinates as if aiming the nose of the world itself at a pinprick on a map. Somewhere out there, someone saw a flash. A merchant ship reported a bright wound on the water, then a drifting smear of flame. The Mariner was gone, 13 men with it. The search for the missing had reached out and been devoured by the same dark. By morning, the sea wore its usual face. 21 ships and 240 aircraft combed an area so large you could lay whole nations across it and still have water left over. They flew the lines like stitches, forward and back, square by square, patient as tailors. Spotters peered until their eyes watered. Hours turned to days. Bit by bit, the hope you can say aloud turns into the hope you carry wordless in your chest. And still, no wreckage, no oil rainbow, no seat cushion, nothing that would break the spell. In offices with drawn blinds, men collected scraps, radio logs, witness notes, weather bulletins, scraps of map corners pasted like bandages onto larger sheets. A clerk turned a page and found the same contradictions waiting, as if the problem had simply moved to the next leaf. 2 compasses failing at once, bearings that made no sense, signals heard where signals should not reach. One officer tapped the back of his pencil against his front teeth and stared at the phrase he'd written an hour before. Cause unknown. He underlined it twice and didn't feel any better. There were hearings because there must be hearings. In rooms that smelled of old paper and damp wool, questions were asked gently and then again more sharply. What had Taylor thought he saw? Why had West not felt like West? Why had the ocean looked white? Human beings do not like the word mystery unless they are safe inside a story, and this story had walked out of the book and set its wet boots on a government desk. The original draft of the report leaned at first toward pilot error, then it leaned away. The final page settled where no one wanted it to settle: cause of disappearance, unknown. Outside those rooms, a line passed from mouth to mouth like contraband. It's as though they flew to Mars. The public, having survived a war and grown skilled at sorting rumor from truth, reached for a new phrase. The Bermuda Triangle had been a shape on charts. Now it became a shape in the mind. The air over that water changed the way people talked. We are not built to live among unresolved endings, and so explanations stepped forward wearing their different clothes. Magnetism, maps scribbled with invisible lines, the great compass of the earth turning its shoulder against little iron needles. Weather, hard rain, downbursts, the muscular indifference of a winter squall. Human error, math done fast and wrong while the clock bled minutes and the light thinned. And then the other stories, the ones that arrive in whispers and refuse to leave. Windows in the air, time slipping like a rung beneath a hand, lights moving where lights do not belong, things with intentions we cannot name. Both my compasses are out. The sentence stuck to the world and would not peel away. In aviation, redundancy is a sacrament. Instruments fail, but not together. Not without a trail of debris to show how they failed. Somewhere on a Florida wall, red string ran from a map pin near Fort Lauderdale to a pin near Grand Bahama, and then to nothing, a line that hung in space with no place to land. Investigators don't like lines that go nowhere. Families like them even less. Decades passed in the way decades do, quietly, until you count them. Sonar learned to paint the seafloor in shades of ghost. Divers left silver streams of bubbles above cold aluminum shapes asleep in black silt. A dozen aircraft found, a dozen tragedies named and returned to their dead. But never 5 Avengers in a row, never the exact pattern, never the closing page you could set down with both hands and say aloud, "This is it. This is where the story ends." Each time, hope rose with the same disciplined stride, and each time it turned at the door and walked away without knocking. Every December, at the edge of a runway that no longer shakes with wartime traffic, people gather and stand with their coats buttoned to the throat. Names are read, 14 from the flight, 13 from the rescue, and the sound goes up into a sky that remembers everything and says nothing. A bugle carries a thin gold thread over the tarmac and out toward the water. On the base, a plaque throws back winter light. They flew into the storm and did not return. Someone reaches to touch the letters with the flat of the hand, as if to confirm that the statement is about people and not only about airplanes. The legend spread in the way legends do. Patiently, obedient to appetite. Paperbacks with generous fonts, documentaries with elegant recreations, and maps that glow movie scenes where lightning opens a mouth in the clouds and something you cannot quite see moves behind it. All of them return to the same moment in the radio room when the voice said, "The ocean looks white." And all of them do the same thing stories do when they meet an empty space. They try to fill it. But a mystery is not a hole to be paved. It is a terrain with its own weather. The more you walk it, the more you learn where not to step. There are photographs from that week in 45. The flight line, the palms wind mussed, the bare arms, the way men smile at cameras without quite believing in them. There are copies of orders, stamped and restamped, signatures sinking into paper like footsteps into wet ground. There are transcripts with places where the tape stuttered and the pen guessed. There is a slip of paper someone folded twice and put in a pocket, the words on it now worn to lace. A heading, a time, a fragment. Lost does this. It makes archivists of strangers. What happened that afternoon above the Bahamas can be arranged into a dozen neat diagrams, and all of them are honest, and none of them are enough. Imagine the belly of a cloud rubbing its wool across the ocean until sea and sky are the same color. Imagine a magnetic line that no one can see leaning a few degrees harder than usual, just enough to blur north into not north. Imagine fatigue arriving like a polite guest and then refusing to leave. Imagine a man with responsibility for other men trying to choose between two versions of the world that are both true to him. Now lift those imaginations out of your head and set them over 300,000 square miles of moving water at dusk. That is what the search crews flew into. That is what they did not find their way out of. What remains are voices, because voices outlast almost everything. My compass is out. I can't make out anything. We'll have to ditch soon. If you play the idea of those words in your mind, you will hear the silence that follows them, and you will feel the silence thinking about how to answer. On a good day, a radio is a thread. On a bad day, it is a mirror that shows only your own breathing. If you enjoyed watching this video, make sure to leave us a like and follow this channel for more mysterious stories.